Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy, the Hindu News Analysis. So today is 24 June 2024 and we have few important articles for today's discussion, and all these articles are very important from the examination perspective and examination point of view. Now firstly, we have a very important article regarding the degradation that has been taking place with respect to the environment, climate change and existing environmental pollution across different cities in India. And in fact, recent 18th Lok Sabha elections completed and a new NDA government was formed recently. So therefore, in this context, environment should be considered as a priority and we need to act quickly on the environmental degradation to ensure that we make a rapid gains in terms of environmental conservation and protecting the fragility of the environment. And that is what the author has been discussing in this first editorial, and we'll understand this, right? So the degree of environmental degradation that has been taking place across India, we will be understanding in this article. And apart from that, from the polity perspective, both prelims and mains examination, so we will talk about the issue of pro tem speaker, right? So pro tem speaker is recently appointed, Bhartruhari appointed as a pro tem speaker, right? So in this context, we'll understand the position of speaker and which constitutional articles provides for the position of speaker, what are his powers and responsibilities, and the conventions that are established in the parliamentary form of government in India. So everything we will understand about the pro tem speaker and the speaker also. And apart from that, we will also briefly understand about a recent report by Confederation of India's Industry with respect to the electronics manufacturing in India, that the competition that we have been facing with respect to China when we talk about the electronics manufacturing and the components that we have been importing from China. And apart from that, the Confederation of Indian Industry has also recommended certain suggestions. It has provided certain suggestions with respect to allowing more foreign direct investment from China and at the same time allowing the skilled workforce from China to India. So everything is provided in that particular detailed recommendations, and we will also look into it. And after that, we'll also understand Pushpak. We all knew about this Pushpak. This is a reusable launch vehicle launching exercise, right? Reusable launch vehicle exercise. And now we will also understand this Pushpak in a very detailed manner. And recently Pushpak 0.3 mission was successfully conducted by the ISRO. Now in this context, we will understand all these important articles. Now before discussing them, yesterday I have given one practice question for you, right? So the practice question was, which principle among the following was added to the Directive Principles of State Policy by the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act? Now we all knew that part 4 of the Indian Constitution, right? Part 4 of the Indian Constitution from Article 36 to Article 51 actually provides for the Directive Principles of State Policy. We all very well knew about this, right? However, to this Directive Principles of State Policy are provided as instrument of instructions and they were inherited from these instrument of instructions were provided in the Government of India Act of 1935, and apart from that, these DPSPs were derived from the Irish Constitution, right? So however, after the Constitution came into force, a 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act was made in the year 1976, and this Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976 has brought new Directive Principles of State Policy. It added, the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act added 4 new Directive Principles of State Policy. Now among all these given options, so the correct answer for this question is option B, participation of workers for the management of industry, and this is included in the Directive Principles of State Policy through 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, and now it is part of 43A, right? So 43A deals with the participation of workers in the management of industries. Now if you look into all those 4 different directive principles of state policy which were brought into the DPSPs through 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, first and foremost we need to talk about Article 39 of the Indian Constitution, right? Article 39 of the directive principles of state policy. So this Article 39 deals with securing opportunities for the healthy development of children. So this is what Article 39 says. And Article 39A, this is also very, very important. So this Article 39A deals with equal justice and providing free legal aid to the poor. And if you remember, recently we have discussed about the Lok Adalats, right? I hope all of you have remember this Lok Adalat, and these Lok Adalats were formed by National Legal Services Authorities Act. So that was passed in 1987. So Nalsa Act has provided for the Lok Adalats, and Lok Adalats were established to essentially achieve the goal of equal justice and providing free legal aid to the poor, and that is mentioned in Article 39A of the Indian Constitution. And after that we have another important article that is brought into the directive principles of state policy through 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act, that is 43A, which deals with to take steps to secure participation of workers in the management of industries, that is 43A. And after that there is also 48A. So 48A deals with the protection and improvement of environment, safeguard forests and wildlife. Now just remember, these 4 are the directive principles of state policy which are added into the constitution through the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. Since it was asked previously, it is very important that you have to remember these 4 directive principles of state policy which were added through 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976. Now I have one more prelims practice question for today. See, just practice this, just try to answer this question in the comment section. So the question is, Caspian Sea is bordered by which of these given countries? Now option A says that Russia, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, Azerbaijan. Option B says Russia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Iran. Option C says Russia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Iran. And option D says Russia, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan and Iran. So try to answer this question, because the map based questions UPSC has been very often asking, and this year they have asked about the North Sea, right? So Northern Sea. In a similar way, it is very important that we need to identify the countries which are bordering Black Sea, Northern Sea, Baltic Sea and even the Caspian Sea, because it helps us further improve our skills with respect to mapping. So try to answer this question in the comment section and I'll be providing you the correct answer in tomorrow's class. Now without any delay, we'll start this discussion. So first and foremost article is creating the space for governance with a green heart. As I have already told you that this particular article is dealing with the degradation of environment, and along with the degradation of environment, the government has not been adequately prioritizing the environmental conservation or environmental protection, and that is where the problem comes. And in this article, the authors have been saying that a new term for this government, NDA government, actually begins in this Lok Sabha, and therefore it must have a green concerns close to the heart. And the government should prioritize environmental protection and environmental conservation. Well, we have never had a government that truly put environment first. So every government in India that always looks for the development, mostly prioritizing development growth rather than putting environment as a priority aspect, because when you look into the environment is a long-term area to focus, right? So it will not give us short-term gains. So because of that reason, government may faces criticism if it do not focus on growth and development, if it do not achieve any significant gains. And because of that reason, every government in India mostly focuses on economic growth and development as an agenda. And that proved to be actively inimical to the interests of environment. Now, whenever we are taking environment as a less prioritized area and focusing more on economic growth and economic development, so that will be inimical to the interests of environmental conservation without any doubt, because over a period of time, due to the multiplier effect of economic growth and economic development, what has been happening, it leads to the destruction of natural environment, degradation of natural environment due to the excess use and exploitation of the existing resources, and also the wasteful usage of those resources without any sustainability principles in usage. Now when we look into the existing situation with respect to the natural disasters and increasing intensity and frequency of these natural disasters, there is an increasing vulnerability also along with these disasters, right? So however, the remediation for the climate change and the disasters which are associated with the climate change actually includes building resilience. So it is very important that we must build resilience for those disasters which are primarily driven by the climate change. Now, who is responsible for climate change? Human beings or anthropogenic activities are primarily responsible for the climate change, and climate change further driving the natural disasters. So in order to prevent these natural disasters, what we have to do, we have to build resilience. Resilience is very important, and along with the resilience, food security is another major challenge. Now global population has reached 800 crore population across the world, and in fact India itself have around 140 crore population. Therefore, increasing climate change, erratic rainfall, drought-like conditions, floods, cyclones, and increasing heat wave-like conditions. So therefore, in this context, it is very, very important for us that we need to ensure food security for our growing population. And apart from that, there is also a need for ensuring access to essentials. So these should be the priority areas for the government. Only then we will be able to deal with the present levels of climate change and climate change induced disasters. However, without a doubt, climate change has been causing a number of disasters that were given here, right? So we all knew about this, right? So climate change has been causing disasters like floods. So floods are becoming very, very frequent, right? So we every day here, or during the rainy season or during any cyclone season, if heavy rainfall takes place in cities, now a flood like situation has been started emerging in those cities. We have experiences of floods in states like Karnataka and Telangana and even Chennai also, even Tamil Nadu also. So therefore floods, and there is also an increasing intensity and frequency of famines and heat waves. Heat waves have been claiming number of lives, and the intensity of the heat waves has significantly increased in recent times. And after that, wildfires, or they are also known as forest fires. And about these wildfires or forest fires, we have recently discussed that Uttarakhand government was unable to control the forest fires, and that led to the destruction of hundreds of thousands of acres of forest areas, and even threatening the existence of wild flora and fauna. And in fact, human induced factors are also responsible for increasing intensity of these wildfires or forest fires. And after that, the water shortages, recent example being the Bengaluru water crisis, and even droughts have been becoming more and more prominent, and they are becoming more and more frequent across India. So therefore, in this context, in this particular context, it is very, very important for us to have a contingency plans in place, right? Whenever we have a comprehensive contingency plans in place to meet the situations that are being created by these disasters, we can be able to protect these vulnerable populations, and we can also diminish harm. So diminishing harm in the sense that the vulnerability can be reduced, and loss of lives and loss of property can be significantly reduced through these contingency plans. So therefore, we need to be better prepared to deal with such negative disaster or such disasters which are created by the climate change. However, from updating building guidelines, we need to update the building guidelines in our cities. So it is very, very important. And along with that, we should also preserve the natural storm barriers. So when I say natural storm barriers, for example, across the Indian coast, we have the mangroves, right? On different states, we have the largest mangrove plantations, and these natural mangrove plantations are known as the natural barriers. Now, why they are known as natural barriers? Because because they reduces storm surges, they reduces the intensity of cyclones, and even if tsunamis have been taking place, then these mangrove plantations can prevent the intensity of those tsunamis. And now the concern is that rising sea levels, because of rising sea levels, it leads to the submergence of coastal areas or submergence of coastal regions. Now when we have these natural barriers, they will prevent the negative impacts of rising sea levels due to the climate change. And therefore we need to focus on protecting and conserving these natural barriers such as mangrove forest. And along with that, we should also be able to build establish funds, and those funds can be used for evacuation and rehabilitation purposes. So that is very, very important here in this context. And after that, we need to talk about the forest cover that is existing as of now. Now we all knew that if you look at India, so we have around 23.62 percentage of out of a total geographical area, we have around 23.62% of area under the forest, right? So India has one of the world's lowest levels of green cover per capita. Green cover per capita in the sense that now if you divide total forests in India, so for each person, so it is said that India has world's lowest levels of green cover per capita. So therefore it is a concerning thing. Now if we can make the comparisons of the per capita availability of green cover, it is only 28 trees head count per populace, but in contrast Canada has 8,953 trees for one single person. And even if you look at China is also a country with a huge population, right? So despite having a huge population, China's in China there are 130 trees for one person, but in India there are just 28 trees for one single person. So therefore this has been pointing out towards the fact that we need to focus on further enhancing our forest cover, further enhancing the tree cover. However, in recent times, what has been happening, the forest cover has been significantly declining across India, and the major decline has been registered in the northeast India. Major decline in the forest cover has been registered in the northeast India. However, the improvement in the forest cover has been registered in the states like Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. Now if we can try to remember things, that what are the major factors that are responsible for the deforestation or declining forest cover. So first and foremost, we can say that shifting cultivation in northeast is responsible, right? Shifting cultivation. And apart from shifting cultivation, increasing population and settlements, agriculture, all these factors have been over a period of time leading to the gradual erosion of the forest cover in India. But urban areas need to have the higher forest or tree cover, but the urban areas are now significantly facing the extreme environmental stress because the forest cover or tree cover in these urban areas has been significantly declining. And that is being observed from the fact that if you look into the heat wave like conditions, most of these heat waves are more prominent in these urban areas, right? So heat waves are more prominent in these urban areas, for example centers like Delhi. And heat wave coupled with the urban heat island effect. Remember, we have also discussed about this urban heat island effect. So all these factors have been making cities non-livable areas for the people, right? And in fact, all these factors have been substantially increasing the cost of living for the people as well. So therefore, the damage to our forest has been covered up with questionable accounting. Now, whenever we talk about the deforestation or declining tree cover, so the damage that is being done to the forest has been covered with the accounting which is questionable in nature. right? So in fact, this actually includes plantation, forest, tree cover in urban centers. So there are not really attempts or efforts from the governments, civil society, and even the municipal bodies to promote green cover, of promote or plant number of trees in these urban areas, and they have been further intensifying the frequency and intensity of these heat waves. And after that, recently the outgoing parliament has passed this Forest Conservation and Amendment Bill 2023. Now, what was the problem with this Forest Conservation and Amendment Bill? So this particular Forest Conservation and Amendment Bill has a number of provisions which are not actually desirable for the point of view of environmental conservation, forest protection, forest conservation, plantation of trees, and therefore there is a need to roll back this Forest Conservation and Amendment Bill, and at the same time we need to bring in a robust new protections, so that should be put in place. So as I have already told you that the cities have been becoming more and more vulnerabilities to various problems. For example, municipal solid waste is one problem that we very often see in these urban areas, right? Municipal solid waste, due to lack of recycling facilities or treatment facilities, the municipal solid waste is very often dumped in open landfills, and these open landfills are the breeding grounds of mosquitoes, and these landfills are also polluting the soil and even air also. And after that, when we talk about this municipal areas, the municipal areas have also been facing the problem of plastic pollution, and even plastic pollution, e-waste, and even air pollution is one of the most serious issue in these urban areas. Air pollution is due to number of factors. For example, vehicular emissions, industrial emissions, construction dust. So everything comes together, and it has been contributing to the air pollution. However, even if these urban centers have any water bodies or any wetlands, so those water bodies and wetlands are being encroached upon by the real estate gangs. So they were illegally encroached because of increasing value for those lands, and there is a hand in glove of bureaucrats with the politicians and these real estate agents. All these factors have been contributing to the increasing vulnerability and unlivability of Indian cities. And in fact, when we talk about Indian cities, a lot of tier 2 and tier 3 cities across the Gangetic belt are now have unacceptable levels of air pollution. So the air pollution in Indian cities has been substantially increasing, or it has been registered a higher levels of air pollution. Now, apart from air pollution, when you look into the availability of water, for example, Bengaluru, for example, recent Delhi water crisis, so availability of water is also very, very low in these urban centers. But on the other hand, the population has been substantially increasing, and in this context, how do you accommodate drinking water for all the population in those urban areas is a major challenge. And we have recently seen the water crisis in cities like Bengaluru, Chennai, and even Delhi. And therefore, in this context, access plays a very, very important role here. And if there are any green spaces like parks or any a small forest areas with a tree cover in these urban areas, either they are cut down as part of the development of infrastructure projects, or they are being encroached upon. So that we very often see in these water bodies and green spaces. So they are being occupied, they are being encroached, and that has creating heat islands in these urban areas. Now, urban heat island has been further intensifying the existing temperatures and making our cities unlivable in nature. And in fact, there are number of smaller cities, tier 2 and tier 3 cities, and these cities also have a number of manageable problems. Okay, so but without timely interventions, even though those problems which are being faced by smaller cities are manageable problems, when we don't have the timely intervention, and it is very important, it is very difficult to solve such problems which are being faced by these small cities. Now, when we talk about the sewage management which is being generated from the urban households, now out of the total sewage which is being generated, only 28% of the sewage is adequately treated in urban areas, and remaining sewage is just left into the rivers, so thereby contaminating and polluting the river waters as well. And in fact, recently in India, especially the Himalayas destruction has also been taking place. Now, destruction of Himalayas is a very, very serious concern. Why? Because now Himalayas has been the source of drinking water for crores of people in India, and Himalayas also play a very, very important ecological role. However, in this context, destruction of Himalayas is really a serious concern for India's population. However, increasing climate change in fact had a number of repercussions on the mountains of India, especially the Himalayas. Now, what is happening with the global warming and climate change? The temperatures have been increasing. The global temperatures have been increasing, and with the increasing of global temperatures, there are a number of glaciers in Himalayas, and those glaciers are very, very sensitive to increasing temperatures. So because of increasing temperatures, there has been glaciers which have been gradually or rapidly receding, and in some places they have disappeared also. And receding glaciers or disappearance of glaciers is a very, very serious concern, because over a period of time, Himalayan rivers such as Brahmaputra, Indus and river Ganga, Yamuna, all these rivers would not have adequate water to sustain the population. And apart from that, the rainfall and temperature patterns have also been changed in recent times. Okay, so because there were either floods or increasing intensity of these droughts, and which have been resulting in creation of water security and food security issues of not just people who are living in these mountainous regions, but also people who are living in northern India, because that creates food security and water security. Now, water security is very obvious, that whenever these glaciers are melting or receding, so that will lead to the lesser water flow in these Himalayan rivers. But if you look into these Indo-Gangetic plains or Indo-Gangetic plains, most of the fertile region in India is located in this Indo-Gangetic plains, and most of the crops are also cultivated here. Now, whenever there is a less availability of water, obviously the crops will not be cultivated in such a large scale, and that results in food security issues for India's population. And apart from that, there are also concerns which have been arising with respect to wetlands, and wetlands also very, very important, and they play a very important ecological role, right? So however, these wetlands have also been receding, they are disappearing, and in this context, it is very important that we need to protect and conserve wetlands for the management of, or for the maintenance of, the biodiversity. However, in order to ensure that we protect, conserve environment and maintain the fragility of the environment, so public participation is very, very important, right? We have discussed about the cities and unlivable nature of cities, increasing pollution, number of the problems that the cities have been facing. In order to mitigate all these challenges, public participation is very, very important. Now, when we talk about the public participation in India, the problem is that with the people and with the government, there is an age-old refusal to listen to the stakeholders and affected people. And if you don't listen to the stakeholders and affected persons, and you don't feel the direct consequences, if you don't feel the direct consequences of the climate change or the environmental degradation, that will be very, very problematic over a period of time, and everyone will start facing the negative consequences. So therefore, it is very important that all of us need to act collectively to deal with the negative environmental concerns. And after that, the environmental impact assessment notification of 2006 has been watered down over the last 5 years, with hundreds of amendments were made, right? A number of amendments were made to this environmental impact assessment. Now, when we talk about this environmental impact assessment essentially deals with the I hope all of you know about the environmental impact assessment. So it actually means that, for example, any project is being undertaken. Imagine that there is a railway project that is being undertaken, that the government has decided to undertake a railway project, and this railway project has been passing through national park or a Panna Tiger Reserve in Madhya Pradesh, right? Now, in this context, under the environmental impact assessment, it is being identified that what are the environmental consequences of such project on the environment in Panna Tiger Reserve over a period of time, right? So if there are any remedies available to mitigate the negative impact of such projects on the environment of this particular tiger reserve, and in case if it has severe environmental implications, then the project would not be undertaken, an alternative plan would be proposed. So therefore, the environmental impact assessment 2006 is not that impactful, and it is not also that much effective. And apart from that, there is an environmental impact mechanisms, impact assessment mechanisms. They need to be elevated to statutory status, or they need to be given the statutory status. On this image you can clearly see the different stages which are involved in the environmental impact assessment. First, there will be a screening or scoping, and secondly, assessment of environmental risk would be done, and mitigation, next stage decision making and monitoring, right? So these are different phases which are involved in the environmental impact assessment. And after that, there is a need for strong environment enforcement mechanisms and bodies which have the teeth, so that they can ensure genuine environmental rule of law in the country. And these are not the luxury concern, they impact the survival and health of millions of people. So therefore, we need to act urgently, and we need to stop the increasing environmental degradation, and at the same time we need to identify all those environmental implications and act urgently and collectively. So next very important article is with respect to the duties of the speaker, right? So speaker position is very important in a parliamentary form of government. So it is also expected that a speaker plays an impartial role without any bias towards either ruling party or any other group of people in the parliament. And in fact, speaker also plays a very important role when it comes to deciding any bill as a money bill or not. And he also given a very important position with respect to the anti-defection law, right? So we all knew about this anti-defection law, and speaker also plays a very important role with respect to referring any bill to the select standing committees of the parliament. In all these contexts, speakers plays a very important role. And the other thing is that speaker also chairs the joint sitting of the Lok Sabha, joint sitting of the both houses of the parliament, right? Whenever president convenes the joint sitting of both houses of the parliament, speaker presides over the joint sitting of both houses of the parliament. Now we will understand this going ahead. So recently, President of India appointed a 7-time MP Bhartrihari Mahtab as the Speaker Pro Tem of the 18th Lok Sabha. So he was the Speaker Pro Tem of the 18th Lok Sabha, and MP Bhartrihari Mahtab was appointed as the Pro Tem Speaker. And in fact, the election for the full-time Speaker is not yet done, rather it is scheduled for June 26. And there are also reports of Deputy Speaker being offered to one of the allies of the ruling National Democratic Alliance. And in fact, the National Democratic Alliance consisting of BJP along with different allies of BJP. So that was a pre-poll alliance among all these parties. They have come together and they have formed a government, NDA government, right? So earlier from 16th Lok Sabha, 17th Lok Sabha, so from 10th Lok Sabha onwards, the deputy speaker position was given to the opposition candidate, right? So any MP from the opposition was given the deputy speaker. But it is surprising that the ruling NDA government is planning to give the deputy speaker position to the one of the MP from the alliance, right? Alliance of the ruling National Democratic Alliance. So therefore, in fact, also remember that this deputy speaker position was held by the opposition party since the 10th Lok Sabha 1991. In fact, it is known as one of the healthy conventions that we have in India, because the speaker position is goes to the ruling party and the deputy speaker position goes to the opposition parties. Now we'll briefly understand about this pro tem speaker, right? So pro tem speaker, Article 94 of the Indian Constitution. So it mentions that the Speaker of the Lok Sabha shall not vacate his or her office until immediately before the first meeting of the Lok Sabha after its dissolution. Right, so this is what Article 94 of the Indian Constitution says with respect to the Speaker of the Lok Sabha. He or she should not vacate the office until immediately before the first meeting of the Lok Sabha after its dissolution. And in fact, the office of the Speaker is never left vacant. It should not be left vacant. So there should be a speaker position continuously. And followed by that, Article 95 clause 1 of the Constitution provides that whenever the the post or the office of the speaker and deputy speaker are vacant, president shall appoint any member of Lok Sabha to perform the duties of the speaker and the deputy speaker. In fact, president also appoints pro tem speaker under this provision of 95 clause 1. President also appoints pro tem speaker till the full-time speaker is elected. So till the full-term speaker is elected, the pro tem speaker acts as a speaker and he performs the duties and functions of the speaker. And in fact, when we look into the term of the pro tem speaker, it essentially means for the time being. Okay, so pro tem means for the time being or temporary. And in fact, the term pro tem speaker is nowhere mentioned in the Constitution, and also it is nowhere mentioned in the rules of Lok Sabha. Rather, it is just a conventional term, and which is being mentioned in the handbook of working of Ministry of Parliamentary Affairs. So you just have to remember this pro tem speaker is nowhere mentioned in the Constitution, and it is also not from any of these conventions. And Article 93 of the Indian Constitution states that, or it says that, Lok Sabha shall choose 2 members among themselves to be elected as a speaker and deputy speaker of the Lok Sabha. And in fact, the election of the speaker is fixed by the president, and the election of the deputy speaker is fixed by the speaker who is already elected. Okay, so first, the date for the election of the speaker is fixed by the president, and once speaker is elected, the date for the election of the deputy speaker is fixed by the speaker. Okay, so this is how the procedure actually goes. Now in this context, what is the role of the speaker? So what role that speaker actually plays? Now we have already discussed that what kind of a role that speaker plays. Now if I can tell you again that there are 2 important constitutional functions that the speaker performs. Now what are those 2 important constitutional functions? So firstly, so he certifies a bill whether it is a money bill or not. Right, so in fact, when you look into the powers of Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha with respect to the money bill, Lok Sabha has a sweeping powers with respect to money bill, right? Lok Sabha has a sweeping powers with respect to the money bills, and Speaker of the Lok Sabha decides any bill as money bill or not. And therefore, in this context, one of the constitutionally important function or constitutional function of speaker is certifying a bill to be a money bill, and at the same time deciding disqualifications under the anti-defection law. So we all knew about this anti-defection law, and if any member of a political party deliberately joined any other political party, then that particular candidate would be disqualified under anti-defection law, right? So deciding disqualification under anti-defection law is the role of the speaker. And in fact, the Lok Sabha rules also provides that the speaker with the powers of referring bills to the standing committees of the parliament. For example, imagine that any bill is introduced in the Lok Sabha and those bills would be referred to the standing committees of the parliament by the speaker of the Lok Sabha. And in fact, he or she also possesses powers with respect to the suspension of members of Lok Sabha for a grave disorder up to the 5 years. And we have also seen that number of members were disqualified earlier also during the 17th Lok Sabha. Now in this context, there are number of conventions, and these conventions are known as healthy conventions that are developed across different countries with respect to the office of the speaker. Now first and foremost, it is very important that we need to talk about the conventions that were developed in Britain with respect to the office of the speaker. Now whenever any member of the house is elected as a speaker, then that candidate must resign to the political party membership, right? And in fact, in India, it is a convention, right? So it is a convention, but not mandatory on the candidate who belong to one particular political party, and upon electing as a speaker, he must resign. This is just a convention, but not mandatory, not obligation on the part of the speaker. But in Britain, speaker once elected to his or her office, so they resigns from the political party to which he or she belongs to. And in case if they are facing elections again, right? So for example, after the completion of the term of 5 years, they again go to the elections. Now in Indian case, if a speaker goes to election after completion of 5 years, he appeals to the voters from the political party side. But it is not the case with respect to the speaker of Britain Parliament. Rather, the speaker seeks election not as a member of any political party, but as a speaker seeking re-election. So he's a speaker and he's seeking re-election. So that is how the healthy convention is developed in Britain to ensure the impartiality in delivering or performing his duties as the presiding officer of the house. And in fact, in India, a 10th schedule provides an exemption for the it provides an exemption for the speaker. Upon electing as a speaker, he can resign to any political party. So the 10th schedule allows a speaker to resign from their political party on being elected to the office. And in fact, the resignation from their political parties on being elected as a speaker could be first step. So this is considered as a first step towards demonstrating their independence and their impartial functioning. Okay, so next, a very important article. As I have already told you that the Confederation of Indian Industry has provided certain recommendations to the government of India with respect to the Chinese investments in India and allowing Chinese skilled professionals into India, and at the same time imposing tariffs on Chinese electronic goods which are being imported into India to protect the domestic electronics manufacturing industry. Now Indian industry has urged the government to revisit or to relook into the restrictions on investment flows. Now during the COVID-19 pandemic, what happened was the government has come up with certain rules with respect to the foreign direct investment, right? So those rules mandated that any country with which India has been sharing its borders, the FDI curbs were being applicable, right? So the government imposed certain FDI curbs on those countries which have been sharing its borders with India, so essentially to prevent predatory takeover of Indian companies. Now what is this predatory takeover of Indian companies? I will explain you clearly. Now predatory takeover essentially means that during COVID-19 pandemic, what happened was a number of countries capitalization, the value of number of countries has drastically declined during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so there was an economic slowdown and economic crisis that was faced during the COVID-19 pandemic, and because of this COVID-19 pandemic, what happened was a number of countries valuation has significantly declined. So now the valuation of these companies has been declined. Now if we allow FDIs from any country, especially China, into India, so those FDIs will focus on companies which values were significantly lesser. So this is known as predatory takeover of Indian companies, because Chinese may see this is an opportunity to take over Indian companies, Indian industry. So that, in order to prevent predatory pricing or predatory takeover of Indian industries or Indian companies, the government has come up with this foreign direct investment norms. Right now, the Indian industry body has sought that we need to relook over the restrictions which are imposed on these investment inflows from China, movement of skilled personnel from China, and at the same time we need to slash high import duties on electronic components. Right, so it is said that the government has imposed high import duties on certain electronic components. Now if we impose high tariffs on certain electronic components which are being imported from China, what happens? Now that makes our electronic goods more costly. Right, so that makes our electronic goods more costly. Rather, we're not importing the manufactured products, rather we are importing the components, and Indian government has imposed higher tariffs on these electronic components also. So since they have a higher tariffs, if we make electronic goods, if we make those manufactured goods and export them to other countries, so those products are not at all competitive with the Chinese goods. Or so therefore it is said that they have made these electronic goods globally uncompetitive vis-a-vis rivals such as Vietnam and China. So this is what the Indian industry body has been saying. Now in this context, developing India as the manufacturing hub would be the focus area. There is no doubt about that. We wanted to develop India as a manufacturing hub for the electronic components and sub assemblies. Now we have to import different components because we do not have a resilience, or we do not have the supply chain resilience and self-sufficiency with respect to these electronic components. So therefore, developing India as a manufacturing hub for electronic components and sub-assemblies, the Confederation of Indian Industries has actually outlined critical actions required for the transition of India's electronic sector and ecosystem from earlier import-dependent assembly-led manufacturing to component-level value-added manufacturing. And because of this reason, the Confederation of Indian Industry has recommended number of reforms with respect to China. Right, so when we talk about the FDI restrictions, these FDI restrictions were imposed during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. Right, so during 2020, the FDI restrictions were imposed on countries which have been sharing land border with India, and they are specifically focusing on China to prevent the predatory acquisitions during the pandemic because of the low valuations of the companies. So however, the COVID-19 times have passed and companies have regained their valuations, and therefore there is no point if we impose restrictions on Chinese investments, Chinese FDIs in India. So this is what the Confederation of Indian Industry has been suggested to the government of India. So therefore India should adopt a non-restrictive approach towards investment. Now any investments which are which are interested to invest in India, so the government's approach should be a non-restrictive approach. And component imports, openness towards technology transfer in deficient areas, ease of inward movement of skilled manpower, and easing of non-trade tariffs. And all these are the reforms that the Confederation of Indian Industry has suggested with respect to China. So next important article is with respect to the Pushpak. So that is a reusable launch vehicle, again clears the test. Okay, so this is Pushpak reusable launch vehicle. So which agency conducts this? Indian Space Research Organization has been successfully completed the third reusable launch vehicle landing experiment. So this is reusable launch vehicle landing experiment, right? So reusable launch vehicle landing experiment was successfully conducted by ISRO, in its aeronautical test range in Chitradurg in Karnataka, right? Now we'll understand what is the significance of this reusable launch vehicle exercise. Now Pushpak is actually the space agency's winged vehicle that you can see here. This is Pushpak and this is space agency's winged vehicle, and it was released from an Indian Air Force Chinook helicopter from an altitude of 4.5 kilometers. So first it was taken into the higher altitudes through the Chinook helicopter, and from the Chinook helicopter, so it was released onto the ground, right? So the vehicle then found its way to an exact landing center. Okay, so the place where it was determined to land, the vehicle then found its way to an exact landing on the center line of the runway, even though the conditions were tougher than the previous tests. The conditions were much tougher than the previous tests. And in fact, the goal of this particular test reusable launch vehicle experiment 3 was to show or demonstrate ISRO can still do independent landings even when the conditions are not conducive, or even when conditions are more difficult to do such experiments or such landings. Okay, so in fact there were a lot of cross range and strong winds, and despite such a difficult and such harsh conditions, the ISRO successfully landed this reusable launch vehicle. Now what are the major implications for future space missions with this Pushpak successful launch? So the success of reusable launch vehicle landing exercise 3 is actually one of the remarkable achievement for ISRO, right? So because ISRO has been planning to create this reusable launch vehicle technology, and this reusable launch vehicle technology will actually allow space missions to happen more often, and it is also more affordable and less costly for now at the global level. If you look into the space industry, the space industry has been focusing on the cost effectiveness of these space missions, especially when the advent of private space agencies started playing a dominant and a very important role across the world. Most of these space agencies have been focusing on the cost effectiveness, cutting down the cost over a period of time. So the reusable launch vehicle technology can actually play a very important role in cutting down the cost and also making the space launches much more easier. And improvements in autonomous guiding algorithms and sensor fusion technology that is inbuilt in this reusable launch vehicle were proven in this mission are very important for future orbital re-entry missions, and which actually need a safe and accurate return paths. So this is about the reusable launch vehicle landing exercise 3 that is being conducted by ISRO as part of its effort to demonstrate the technology with respect to the reusable launch vehicle. So that's all in this lecture, and please like the video and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.